Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Good afternoon. I don't know about you. I'm thrilled to be here because it's always great to talk about the things that we're passionate about, but also in terms of where we are going in terms of marketing and all the changes that have happened recently. So I don't know how many people were here in January when we held the digital breakfast about influencers and social media. And I talked about the changes in the algorithms for social media. So I normally talk about social media, but I'm going to kind of like go a little bit off, but it's still related to social media. We're going to talk about storytelling. So it's going to tie in with Susie's content and some of Rue's content, and basically kind of like try and find ways to kind of go a bit deep and a little bit wide, but get you all thinking about new ways to tell your stories. I always feel like I'm at church when I stand behind these, so I want to stand to the side. So in terms of the current landscape, for those of you, how many people have been affected by these social media algorithm impacts? Negatively or positively? Negatively. So are you now starting to spend more money, as we want, as Rue said? Are you now spending more money in terms of paid to actually reach your audiences? So even though I haven't been able to deep dive into what those changes actually mean, I know that in terms of some of the clients and some of the people that I've been working with, across all the platforms, they're experiencing changes in terms of decline in reach, organic reach, and basically who knows what their strategy should be. I mean, the strategy that I wrote 2 years ago that I was just saying to a couple of people I have to go and rewrite, and hope there were no more algorithm changes for the rest of the year, but I'm sure that there's more to come. So if we now have to think about organic reach is declining, how do we reach our audiences? Do we rely on social media in the way that we used to? I think some of us as marketeers have over-relied on social media because it's a great tool. It does quite a few things that we weren't able to do before. For those of you who mentioned kind of like going back as far as 2009, some of us were thinking, how about 1999? In terms of the way that we implement marketing strategies, especially digital marketing strategies as well. And the reason why some of the algorithms have changed are because of the reports last year about the impact of social media currently on mental health. They're not very social spaces. Apparently us as marketers have ruined social media. Poo-poo. And basically there's a need for, I meant that as in poo-poo, not the other way around, okay? And just the need for the social space to be more social. So particularly Facebook wanted they wanted friends and family to engage more with each other, and perhaps brands will have to find their own way to engage with audiences, whether it's through paid, probably through groups, or a deeper, more integrated strategy for their marketing. So how can we make the difference with content? As a social media strategy, and I've been doing this for about 12 years now, there are 2 questions I get asked all the time. One is, how do I get more followers? And I keep having the conversation, it's not about more followers, it's about the quality of your followers. And the second one is, I don't know what to say. So, and it doesn't matter how big the brand is or how small that solo entrepreneur is, the questions are generally the same. So it looks like the differentiator at the moment is the quality of your content in terms of not only for paid content, but also for organic and any other type of content that you put across your different channels, especially if you're going for the omni-channel approach. So when I do my audit, so when I get a brief from one of the team and they've asked me to do a competitive review, I'm specifically looking for branded storytelling. I'm not so much interested in keywords, although I should be. I'm not so much interested in SEO or social search kind of characteristics. I'm looking at the page as a user. I put myself in the hands and the shoes and the flip-flops and the seats and the couch of a user to kind of like see if there's any kind of connection for me with the brands who are trying to sell me their story. customers look beyond prices and features. I think we all begin to realize that in a competitive world, yes, there are some of us, depending on the experience we're looking for, and depends perhaps whether it's a special event or a special holiday, we might want to pay that additional premium. But why should we pay that premium to your company versus the company that we already use? Branded storytelling forges human connections. So we all know from our own behavior that we don't just buy with a company just because they're the cheapest or the brightest or the most local, but do their values align with ours? Do they treat their customers really well? How do they respond to their customers in the comments section? I've got a case study which is positive, but I've seen an opportunity where they could actually do even better. And also, customers want to connect with the backstory of the brand. So at the moment, a lot of the tech companies are getting a lot of flack because their backstory for the last 2 or 3 years isn't looking very healthy right now. And there's a lot of work, whether it's via PR or other ways to make that story look positive. But in terms of a travel company, what's your roots as a travel organization? Who do you care for? I think the Red Carnation illustration with the dance troupe in South Africa is really kind of like important because it goes beyond selling the holiday. You're sold the brand story, you're sold the values, you're sold the interest and the connection with the land. Storytelling is also medium agnostic. I always teach, because I also teach as well, is that content strategy should always start channel neutral. A lot of people start off with, okay, let's develop content for Facebook, and then you kind of get stuck because then Instagram, you don't want 30 hashtags anymore, you want less than 5, otherwise your content's seen as spammy. You can't go back in and edit it because that also is seen as spammy. Your video has to be less than 60 seconds because that's as much as it can take, or sometimes around 70, because I've been clocking it and it's not always 60. Your Insta stories must be fun and you know, compared to Snapchat stories, which is a totally different audience and a different environment. So you have to think about all those things. So if you start from the level up, you have a better opportunity to kind of then tailor your overarching story into the channels and also the tools within the channels. And 87% of your customers and our customers want more meaningful connections with brands. They don't just want to hear about how great a room looks or the view from a room is or how wonderful the pillows are or what kind of breakfast that's served, although I'm interested in that. But what kind of breakfast is served? How can you deliver more meaningful connections with your audiences? So in terms of the science bit, because I think I might have mentioned this before, but I'm actually a STEMette from the 80s. Stories engage the brain more than data. So I do audits and I've seen some travel pages that just list the features of the experience. But if you tell a story, I mean, how many people subscribe to Netflix? Everyone but me, shame. But when you think about it, the reason why you subscribe to Netflix and probably watch Netflix more than terrestrial TV or Sky TV is because you get told more stories. Yeah, Sky News and BBC News and ITV News and all those other channels and the soaps tell you stories, but you remember those stories better. I've heard some conversations around Black Mirror and people able to actually recall the plots and the synopses of that series better than I could ever think. And then I see a clip on Facebook and think, okay. Stories stimulate biological and emotional responses. So when you think, there was a clip I saw on Facebook the other day. Apologies to any Americans in the room, but this is just the content of the video. A journalist went out, or somebody from a media company went out to in a city in America and asked people what book they last read. Somebody's seen that video already. Most people couldn't name a book. It was Jimmy Kimmel, actually, Jimmy Kimmel, the late night host. And he said they could just mention the Bible, they could just even mention something related to the American Constitution. But when people were prompted, they remembered Dr. Seuss. The most common answer was Dr. Seuss in terms of the books that they found were more enjoyable. I didn't read a lot of Dr. Seuss because I read kind of like more sciencey books because I was just that kind of kid. But I do remember sitting in the library in Balham, SW12, and reading Dr. Seuss and enjoying the poetry from it, and it's very memorable. Our brains are wired to crave stories. So I don't know if I'm one of those people that will take forever. So I know Charlotte's watching me and making sure she's going to be my timekeeper, but sometimes it's easy to kind of like take a long time to tell a story, but people are craving that. We all want to know more about the in-depth aspect of any topic or any story. So for example, Blue Ocean, the reason why it was perhaps more captivating than any other nature reserve stories, not just the horrors of what's happening on our planet, but it's the way those stories were told in a much deeper way than they've ever been told before. Experiences can be transferred through storytelling. It's so much easier to, I think there was a question in Slido about how can you encourage clients to share their content. User-generated experiences work really well because they actually don't come from your voice. And given that there are some stats, and I don't remember the exact figures, but the peer-to-peer conversation and endorsement is much more valuable than the brand's one. Sorry, but that's just the way it is. But it's an opportunity that you can use as brands to be able to tell the story about your company. And stories can offer simulation and and inspiration, just as Rue had mentioned in terms of Airbnb. And I've got Airbnb as a case study as well, so we're kind of like in the same zone. These are the only numbers I'm going to share. I've already said data versus stories. This is the last slide with numbers, I believe. So 92% of people want ads to be told as stories. So remember I said in terms of telling your stories from a paid content perspective, this is where I think remarketing or retargeting comes in really in a very handy way. I'm not an expert on that anymore. It got really sophisticated and I was just like, I'm out. But I think the ways that I've seen people target me with retargeting has been really valuable because I get to understand a bit more about the brand, and I see that the brand is actually keen to understand me better by serving up different content as I go through the experience. 63% of people remember stories versus 5% who remember stats. So that is significant. That was a study that was done in the States, but even if the figure was slightly different, that's significant. So we're told that we need to talk about benefits and focus on the what's in it for me, but how do you deliver the what's in it for me from a customer's perspective? Think about stories. 55% are more likely to buy from you in the future, which is good news. 44% will share your story. And there's the reasons why people share stories, believe it or not, is that it makes them look good. So your story needs to either be, so we talk about share worthy, but there is some data available, which I haven't included in here, but if it makes that person look smart, funny, or intelligent, or they're the first to know they've got the scoop, they'll share your story. So how can you deliver that type of content? And yippee, 15% will buy from you immediately. Yay, that's what we want. Has anybody heard of Jab, 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 Right Hook, the book? Or Gary Vaynerchuk? Or Gary V, the kind of like brash American who talks about social media in a very passionate way? Yeah, that Gary V. So Gary V is an author of a book called Jab, 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 Right Hook. And the philosophy is that a lot of brands, especially when they got the permission to go onto social media and actually communicate with people, they would try and sell to people 100% of the time. So he came up with, so his book is around the theory of you jab, something for the audience, jab, something else for the audience, jab, something else for the audience, and then you have to get my left and right. I'm left-handed, right hook. And that's when you present your marketing content. So for those of you who are using that kind of split or trying to figure out what could you use in your marketing, your storytelling aspect is the bit that you can actually present as your marketing. But mind you, at the same time, even though I say don't, I'm going to contradict myself slightly here. Even though I say don't use stats, there are some times when stats are actually quite valuable. And it's all about how you present them. So I write content as well. So if I was going to present stats, I'd probably present it as an animated pie chart, make it quite cool, maybe put some cool babies or cool animals so that it kind of like gets that engagement, and then people will remember the stats because the stats are presented as a story. So in terms of types of storytelling for brands, so I think in many cases we've talked about a couple of them already. So one of them's the consumer story, so that's the UGC. So what's the consumer's experience of your brand, your service, your product, their experience? The employee story is really important, and that's why I was kind of like sitting there nodding my head when Susie presented the video, because in a previous life, so to speak, I've also worked on graduate recruitment advertising. And the employee story is sometimes the bit that lots of companies are quite scared to tell, but that actually helps to reinforce the company culture story. So if you have a massive, or if you have a huge mandate on your corporate social responsibility, or if you are like Sky, for example, and you're focusing on Sky Ocean and that kind of aspect, you can tie that all in and even talk about your competitors in a nice way. Your competitors in this day and age ideally should almost be like your collaborators. Really? Okay, I have to rush through this. I told you I can go through it. I can talk for a long time. And your competitor story can actually tie in a particular way, and then maybe they could be a collaborator. And then you've got the community and marketplace story. So I'm going to, I'll come to Airbnb real quickly. So benefits of using stories. Storytelling can set you apart from the competition. In a world where social media strategies are pretty much almost all the same per platform, how could you differentiate? What could be your USP? You can convey your brand personality, but you have to know what it is in the first place. Striking an emotional chord. Your brand has to be like a person. What would your brand be if it was a human? What color hair? Who would they marry? What kind of kids would they have? Where would they live? What kind of car would they drive? What kind of job would they have? And to get customers coming back for more. So in terms of crafting your branded stories, 4 areas you can look at in terms of your origins. What's your background of your organization? What were the key founding principles? So when you think of companies who have been around for more than 50 years, those are quite clear on their websites generally. What's your challenges? Be honest with yourself. Showcase your rises and your falls. Nowadays, in a world where we're kind of like a bit more open about our personal development as human beings, we also want to know the personal development of the brands that we're invested in. What's your trials? What's your challenges? How did you win? How did you get back up again? What's your losses? And demonstrate how you won those losses. Virgin do this all the time. And then also include your testimonials from your customers, your suppliers, and your partners too. So in terms of building a brand narrative, questions to ask, and I'm just checking because I saw just checking if there are any spelling mistakes. That's my fault. That's nobody else's fault on here. So questions to ask yourself: who are you in terms of building your own brand narrative? What are your values? What do you stand for? What's your truth? What do you specifically do? How do you add value and care to the industry, to the environment, to your customers, to the community? How do you solve problems? Do you have a particular framework? When you Google or you're writing presentations, there's lots of PowerPoint presentations all over SlideShare and Google search. and they are specific to that organization or that industry. How do you engage and contribute to product development, to the industry, and also make it emotional and relatable? So in terms of steps to implement, it doesn't have to always make people laugh. It's not always about your brand trying to entertain, but you do have to be authentic, you do have to be open, and you do have to be honest. Social media has always been about that, but it's been something that's been quite difficult for many organizations to do because it's an attitude that the entire company has to embrace. Show that your company, your customers are real people with real stories to tell. So anyone who's still using actors, please stop, please don't do it anymore. Share your core values, your purpose, your beliefs, your missions. And the key thing is activating the community. I know that some people have asked me in the past, how do you build a community? And a lot of it is about the engagement of the brand in the community and tell stories that matter to them. So those are... Okay. So here are 9 points that you can, we'll share in the slides with you afterwards that I use when I'm developing the content strategy. So I'm looking at values, the tone of voice, the formats, the distribution channels. So I try to have a holistic viewpoint. And as you notice, I've got be share worthy because that's even more important on social media. Sources of inspiration can come from lots of different places. And definitely look in your comment section and your competitors' comment section for sources of inspiration. When I'm building a content plan, I'm actually use a matrix, which is based on either the user journey stages or the content objectives. So if the content objective is awareness or conversion or nurturing, I then develop the content from there. Airbnb, the reason why I've included, I'm just going to focus on this one of the last slides, is because the way that they've told the story about this image, looking out this second story window is like gazing on a painting, only you can actually feel the Tuscan sun seep in. And the rustic kitchen with its wood beams offers the perfect frame. Welcome to the Tuscan life. There isn't really a sell in there. There are no benefits or features in there at all, but what it's trying to do is trying to get into your mind to actually imagine what it's like to be there. And I think that's a pretty strong post. So in terms of tips for success, your brand story, your brand narrative, share your story across channels, empower and involve your audience, guidelines for a good story. Is it true? Is it human? Is it original? Does it serve the customer? And that should be number 1, really. And then in terms of your brand story checklist, why are you qualified to sell the product? That's a hard question to ask. What is your differentiation? What impact does your business intend to deliver? Why do you care? And also, why should we listen to you? So sorry I had to rush through that because I told you I go through, I can talk quite a lot. But the last quote, nobody likes to be sold to, but everyone loves a good story. So I hope I didn't sell it to you, but I hope you enjoyed the story.